I'm Elle Embers, and this is Cosmic Curiosities. Welcome back to Cosmic Curiosities. My name is Elle, and before we dive in today, we're going to take a minute to really connect back home to ourselves. I don't know what you've been doing today, whether this is just the start of your day, whether it's ending, or whether you're halfway through, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes we get so caught up in life that we forget to take a minute to just breathe. So, when you're ready, I'd like you to take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, relaxing your jaw. Take another deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Roll your shoulders up and back. Stretch your neck from side to side. Straighten your back. And take one more deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I'd like you to bring your focus back home to yourself. And I'd like you to think of one thing that you're grateful for and one thing that is grateful for you. Now, doesn't that feel better? Sometimes all it takes is just a minute. If you'd like to continue this journey of connecting back to yourself, releasing your past to step into a brighter and better future, gain clarity, confidence, and direction, or simply come back to a sense of peace in learning how to calm the storms of your mind, you can find all the information on how we can work together with past life regression, cosmic channeling, and energetic coaching by sending me a message on Instagram or visiting my website, ellembers.com. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by the human-sized permission slip, an advocate for individuality, authenticity, self-trust, and empowerment, the lovely Kirsten Morrison. So, let's dive in. Kirsten, welcome to Cosmic Curiosities. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So I always find this question so interesting to answer. It's like the hardest thing in the world. It's like, okay, how long have we got? So my name's Kirsten Morrison, and I'm a 6-2 emotional manifestor in human design, and that information has changed my life in the way that I express myself, in the way that I show up in the world, and in my mission. And I predominantly work with women who are driven by purpose, whatever that means to them, in supporting them to really activate their inherent natural born gifts and amplify that into a really beautiful, rewarding life.
Amazing. Well, that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. And I'm a huge advocate for individuality in that as well, because I just think that we are all so beautifully and wonderfully unique. And I think that living, breathing soul expression that we are and that instrument of purpose that we are is really what we get to hone and perfect in this lifetime and really just continue to embody, because I think that anything that we do from the seat of being ourselves is our purpose and is our contribution. So that's really what I'm all about, is just supporting people to really see and deeply understand themselves so that they can really be the incredible individual that they were born to be.
Yeah, beautiful. So how do you kind of promote this individuality yourself through your modalities, through your business?
So the modalities that I work with are human design, breathwork, and I also do coaching, so mindset practices as well. So those three together have been a really powerful combination, because I feel like the human design just gives you this beautiful framework and context for not only who you are on like a spiritual sort of like soul path level, but also on that tangible human experience level, like actually how you metabolize stress, make decisions, all of those beautiful things that are part of our everyday human experience. So the combination of those two really provides such a beautiful framework and reference point for being able to reflect back exactly how we're here to operate before the mind interferes and before the conditioning was present. And so then really using the breath work as that body aspect to really be able to expand the nervous system's capacity to be able to hold the goals, the visions, the dreams, and really unlock some of the stored experiences that we've got that might be holding us back from that. And then also using those beautiful mindset practices to rewire and reprogram some of those limiting beliefs that we have in the way of us really embracing not only who we are, but really, really stepping into the full capacity and the full potential of what we have to contribute. So they're kind of the three pieces that I really work with in terms of supporting other people with their individuality. But I also feel like one of the words that gets used all the time from my clients and people in my orbit and anyone that really comes into contact with me is the words permission slip. So I feel like my energy and the way that I'm here to operate and my contribution is that I really do have this really beautiful ability to be a permission slip for others in the way that I just really show up as myself on social media. I do things in a very individual way that's true to me. And, it's not necessarily the way that it's done or should be done, but I always just really follow what's true for me. And I think there's permission in that, but I also really offer and extend that permission slip to other people as well. So I'm constantly supporting people and giving them that permission slip and that little fiery kick up the bum sometimes to just really trust what's ultimately true and real and alive for them in the way that they actually want to do it, and just really giving them that like permission slip to be like, fuck it, just do it the way that you want to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I assume that has a bit to do with you being a manifestor and taking that sort of initiative. But I mean, I can vouch for that. I see you on social media all the time. I've met you and worked with one of your workshops before, and definitely like I feel giving me that permission to be like, all right, I can do this. Let's do this. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many elements of my chart that do that. I think definitely the first aspect being the manifestor. We have a closed and repelling aura, and there is that real sort of catalytic energy that is, just present in the way that we be, even if we don't really notice it or know that it's happening. That's the way our aura operates, is it's very initiating for other people. But I'm also what's known as a touch cognition, and that's kind of my sensory superpower. And so part of my energy sort of amplifies that naturally in the way that I'm really here to touch and impact people through my words, through my energy, through my hands. There's like a way of actually being able to sort of unblock energy or sort of shake things up just naturally through that as well, and really be able to move people. But I also am an emotional authority, and I've got this beautiful emotive energy as well in my design that allows me to kind of instill that kind of passion and belief through the emotions as well. And there's in my incarnation cross, which is basically the energetics of our purpose, mine is the left angle cross of individuality. And so the essence of my purpose is really to empower people to be individually themselves. And all four of the little energies that create that are all energies that really activate people's purpose and kind of shock and provoke and unblock the energy in the way of that, and really move people into what is actually aligned for them outside of the constructs of society or the shoulds of success or any of those things. That really just moves people naturally into alignment with themselves. And before I had an understanding of my human design, I would get people like messaging me on Instagram being like, I listened to your meditation and already like this and this happened. And I'm like, how did that happen from like a meditation? Like, you weren't even in the room. And I didn't really understand, again, that even my words had that impact to unblock things. And I think understanding my human design actually gave me a newfound level of, I think, responsibility and awareness of like how my energy operates, and really using that in a more intentional way, because I don't think I was actually realizing the natural impact I was having on people, because I was just in my own little bubble, like just doing my thing, like posting what I wanted to post. And so I think like, even though there's still a part of me that is like that too, it definitely allowed me to step back and reassess how I actually wanted to apply my energy as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say your touch because what came up for me then was like, I was just transported back to that workshop. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go straight off topic. But I was transported back to that workshop, and this was the first experience I'd ever had with breathwork. So this was all new for me, and I didn't really know what to expect. Like, I'd seen some intense, I guess, representations online and some not so intense representations, and I was like, okay, it's going to go one or two ways.
Yeah.
But it was a really beautiful experience, and you came around to each person in that workshop, and when you noticed there was a blockage of energy or a restriction within them, you, of course, asked our permission before we started whether we were okay with being touched. And you came over and you popped your hands on my legs and could see like where this energy was being stored and needing to be released. And it was so powerful, just that connection of physical touch throughout those moments. And even coming through the workshop in different moments in different areas to help release that kind of tension was so powerful for me, at least. But yeah, did you want to, I mean, I've just kind of spilled into breath work a little bit here. Did you want to give everyone a little bit of a explanation on what breath work is to you and how you use it?
Yeah, so breathwork is basic. Well, there's so many different types of breathwork, firstly. So when we say breathwork, it's a pretty broad term, but basically the type of breathwork that I work with is a conscious connected breath, and it's a cyclical breath. And basically the way that I kind of envision it, and the easiest way to explain it, is the breath is kind of almost like a little balloon expanding in your body. It's creating an opening for stagnant energy and emotion to shift and clear. And that doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to have a huge catharsism and this, huge emotional release, which again is like what we see a lot on social media. And that's not always the purpose of breathwork. So we really want to get down into the deeper nervous system layers. So that could look like a big emotional release, and it may not. And so really what we're doing is we're shifting some of this stored energy and emotion that's connected to experiences that our body remembers that maybe even our mind won't. And through that, we're creating this spaciousness in the body, but we're also regulating the nervous system. And for me, I found breathwork by accident in a workshop that I went to. It was a 3-day experience, and the breathwork was on the last day. And for me, that experience was so profound. I came to at the end and was like, wow, I literally feel reborn. I feel like a completely different person. Whatever had shifted for me in my body was enormous. And for me, somatic experience and body experience is always where the deepest transformation is for me personally. That's what I've experienced. And so I went to get my breathwork qualification. So I studied that as well and really wanted to bring that into my work, because for me, like I said, that was what created the biggest transformation. And it has changed so much for me. It's changed the way that I speak. It's literally even changed my posture. Like I used to be really hunched over, and like all of that was just the stored experiences in my body that was trying to shield my heart by having myself sort of like hunched over. It was that kind of like sense of low self-worth that was still stored in my body. And through freeing that from the body, my whole posture changed. My voice used to have this little quiver in it and a shake, like an apology stuck in my throat. And that has shifted as well. And obviously as a manifestor, my voice is one of my biggest contributions. So to feel like I can even just speak, like I wouldn't have even had the confidence to do things like this a few years ago. And so that shifted so much in my physical experience. Even just little things like, well, it's not really that little, but I had a really big surgery where I had a benign tumor cut out of my vocal cords, like in my neck. And that area in my neck was so sensitive with nerve pain for years. And I actually went to the doctors and I was like, is this normal for me to have this? And they were like, well, put it this way, that type of surgery you had, there was a large risk that you could have died. And I was like, wow, okay, I did not know that. Thank goodness I didn't know that before going in. And so they were like, it is normal to have that. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this is just something I'm going to have to live with. And I went to my second breathwork training, and this was probably like 2 years after the surgery. And that whole week, it was such a different experience to the first time I did the training. And 3 sessions in a row, I had this breathwork experience where it was almost like I was under general anesthetic. Like I literally could not move my body. And people were like coming and trying to support me to move, because the movement's what's kind of like shifts things out. And, you know, people do say, you've got to bring some movement in, love. And I'm like, do they not realize I can't? Like, because I was literally like, felt like I was under. And so this happened like 2 days in a row. And then on the 3rd day, I had this experience where I managed to just move my foot at the end of the experience. And then the energy just felt like it was coming up my body, coming up my body, coming up my body. And the person that was supporting me said that where I had the surgery on my neck was like pulsating. And then after that, I have no more pain in that area. And so even on like a physical restoration level, breathwork is so powerful at like clearing the pain that stems from even physical experiences. You know, I've had people that have had, you know, bursitis or like long-term chronic pain in their body that have released that through releasing the emotion that was creating the bracing in the body that was causing that physical tension. Like people who have had sleep apnea come off CPAP machines, like so many different profound things from a physical level as well as an emotional level. Like people who have had, you know, like I said, more confidence, less ability to be reactive in their lives, and more balanced and grounded and able to cope with a larger level of resourced resilience in their lives, but then also just that wild physical layer, because a lot of what's stored in the body emotionally is creating the physical manifestation that we just kind of learn to live with. And so it's really fascinating to see what can be actually even just released on a physical level, let alone the emotional, spiritual level as well. So for me, breathwork has been really a profound part of my journey. And I don't think that I would have continued going in my business without it. And even this year, and I think, you know, every time we kind of move up in different levels in our life and our business, you know, it requires a new level of resourced nature in our nervous system. And so this year I'm like, oh, okay, I actually need to do some more work on my nervous system, because I actually need to be able to be even more anchored in the security that I have in my body. And so that's actually been a huge part of the last 3 months as well, is just really working on that in a deeper capacity too.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
It's been a crazy ride the last few months coming into 2023. And I think a lot of people don't make that connection between a physical ailment and an emotional one, and that they can be connected. And again, spiritual one. Like it's all part of the same group of friends.
Yeah, they're all linked.
But coming into that sense of maybe rebirth and individuality, stepping into 2023, what has your journey been like with that? What have your clients been experiencing? And how has breathwork and human design been anchors for you guys through that process?
If I had to say the most common word that I've seen on my intake forms when people book any type of session or even inquire about mentorship with me is the word lost. That has been the biggest theme this year. It's just like, I feel so lost. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm disconnected from my purpose. I'm just directionless. Like I've lost sight of what I'm doing. And for me, it's really interesting because I know a lot of people started to experience this a little bit last year. And I had such a rough 2021, leaving a long-term relationship and all of the implications that came with that. And so I had so much resistance in that relationship that prevented me from really stepping into all of the creations that I had on my heart that I wanted to birth into the world. And so in 2022, I just went full out at it. Like anyone that I've spoken to recently were like, wow, like every time I went online last year, you're just like, here's this, here's that, here's it. So I was just on this like mad creation high where I was just like cards, journals, like, you know, programs, reader training, like so many different things I had going on where I was just so busy. I actually didn't notice any of whatever. I'm like, what is everyone talking about? This is a great year, because I just had so much like free run where I was finding myself again and I was creating all these things. I was having the best time. I was on such a high. And towards the end of last year, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do when I hit the ground running next year. This is And when I got into January, there was just this real, like, it felt like quicksand. I was like, oh, I don't have the end. Like, this is not feeling like a new year. Like, I don't feel fresh. I don't feel ready. I don't feel like I'm creative. I don't know what I'm fucking doing anymore. Like, it just was like this whole like just get plunged, like I said, into like this almost a dense quicksand. And I was like, all right, well, maybe it's a bit of a slower start than I thought. We'll see how we go. And then January's rolling on, February's rolling on. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why am I not like, because as a manifestor, I work in like big surges and rests. And I'm like, where's my surge? Like, why do I not feel like I'm ready to go? And it just was not happening. And so I really was way more tuned in with what everyone else was saying they were experiencing this year. And I'm like, okay, I'm not alone here, but this is really uncomfortable. And so I felt as well a little bit that like a lot of the things that maybe I was too busy and too focused on my creativity to really process on that emotional level from all of the things that transpired in 2021 and before sort of landed in my lap at the start of this year. And they're like, hey, here's some stuff for you to look at. I know you've been busy, but it's not going anywhere. So like you might want to take a look now. And so I feel like it was just, I can't even describe it really, but it was like illumination is probably the word that I would use, where it's like all of these deeply entrenched patterns, ineffective ways of operating, old mindset stuff, like all of this stuff just sort of started like rising to the surface. And I'm like, wait, I thought I already dealt with all of that. Like, have we not been here? But like, why are we here again? And like, I've looked obviously into a lot of the astrology this year, and that's kind of what has been coming up for everybody, right? We've had this kind of collective planetary energy that's been like, hey, it's really time to close these loops off now. Do you want to keep going with this, or do you want to actually let it go for good? And so it has been a very deeply intense start to the year, I would say, where it was like, when we think about that rebirth cycle, and I did a post about this on my Instagram, but it's like before the caterpillar turns into a butterfly, it goes into that mush in the chrysalis first. And before the phoenix rises from the flames, it crumbles into ashes. And all of us want to be the butterfly. All of us want to be the flaming phoenix, but none of us want to be the fucking ash or the goo. That part sucks, and there's no getting around it. And so I was really fighting it so hard. I was like, I don't want to be the goo. I don't want to be the ash. I don't want this. I just want to create again. I just want to go back to how it was last year. And so I think that resistance like created so much emotional resistance in my body because I wasn't surrendering to what was actually present. And so the minute I just came to this point, at the start of last month, in the start of March, and I was just like, okay, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to go there. I'm just going to stop fighting this. I'm just going to like plunge myself into the depths and just take a look at what is here and what is being asked of me. And the second I stopped fighting it, the clarity started just like flying in, and like everything started making sense. And there was, honestly, I've had so many like light bulb moments over the past like 3 weeks. I could not even tell you what they are anymore. I tried to write them all down the other day, and I was like, I don't even know anymore. Cause it's just like every single day I'm like, wow. I'm like just seeing how every single thing is connected to every other awareness that I have. And it's been, like I said, illuminating, where I'm like, whoa. And I now really see this as such a profound gift, because I can recognize that actually all these things that I've been kind of trying to avoid looking at, or being too busy or too creative to look at, is actually the very thing that's been blocking me from having all of the things that I have wanted, have been trying to work towards, but just haven't quite gotten there yet. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's all of this. And so I have actually found such a deep reverence for the goo and the ash now. And I can feel the energy coming back out the other side. I'm like, oh, okay, my wings are forming. And it's like the energy is shifting. But I'm like, okay, like, thank you for this beautiful gift of the illumination that I received while it felt like I was in the dark. And now I can be like, okay, like I'm starting to see the purpose of all of this. And it's creating the space for me to grow and evolve into in a completely different way. But there's also been a little bit of an identity void that's come with that too, because it's like, well, I don't know necessarily who I'm going to be on the full other side of this yet. And so there's a lot of discomfort, I think, when you're kind of in that in-between stage, when you're like, okay, I can see the parts of myself that I'm letting go of, and I can kind of start to see the parts that are coming in, but they haven't fully integrated yet. So it's like this little limbo land space, this liminal space. And so that's, I think, where the deepest trust comes in of like, okay, let me just keep welcoming this new part in and being willing to let go of the parts that aren't going to come. But I think it's like also like, I think we get so used to things being a certain way, or we get used to expressing ourselves in a certain way, or used to certain offerings, or we get this kind of comfortability. And when that starts to fade away, it's like, oh, well, what am I going to do on the other side of this? So that's kind of what I've been navigating this year. But I would say that pretty much like 99.9% of the conversations I've been having with people, everyone's been experiencing the same thing, where it's like that kind of like loss of clarity, but also this beautiful illumination to really build a new foundation of like even more rock solid beliefs, even more rock solid in our values, even more rock solid in our nervous system, even more rock solid in our why. Because I think that what has kind of happened is everyone's gotten so repetitive and bogged down in the what that we've lost sight of the why. And maybe our why is completely changed. But I think that's kind of what we're being anchored into is like, why do we want to do what we do? Like, why do we do what we do? Why do we want to have our like wellness or fitness or a certain amount in the bank? It's like coming back into the why in all areas so that we can actually recommit to a level of devotion and discipline in our lives that's going to actually be able to expand us past what we even thought possible in the months to come, because there's so much obviously planetary going on as well, but we are in an entirely new era, and that's coming with its own frequency shift where it's like, okay, like the way we've always done things is not going to cut it anymore. And we don't really necessarily know the path forward, but we're walking this path together. We can link arms and reconnect to the why so that when the how or the what becomes challenging, we've got that to stand on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many people have come through to this point where I think we are starting to notice the gratitude that we have for the bullshit, right? Like, because it makes us appreciate those good times and that clarity and the evolution that comes afterwards.
Yep.
But it's just kind of, I guess, remembering that everything has its purpose. And when you're going through those struggles, it's kind of like preparing you for that next phase of growth.
Totally.
And yeah, kind of holding on to that. But at the same time, like, this is changing. Things are changing. And there's that fear and that element of like, I'm going through this alone and I don't know what's next. But like you said, if we're in this together and we're linking arms and we're fighting the fight together, then everything becomes a little bit more comfortable, a bit more secure. So moving through that sense of we're all going through this together, how does individuality come back and play a part in that rebirth?
I think that for such a long time, particularly, you know, even if we just look at the kind of astrology that we're transiting out of, right? So we've had Pluto in Capricorn, which was all about systems and governance. And so I think we can really see things are starting to shift, and that ability to be a little bit more, you know, we're now in Pluto in Aquarius, like edging towards that. And so that's all about like liberation and freedom and expression. It's such a different energy to the rigidity that we've kind of we're coming out of now, right? And I think that for such a long time, society has been founded on this homogenized, structured approach of like one size fits all. And even from birth, literally, we're being indoctrinated like through the school system, university, jobs, like we're just like being molded into being good little citizens to fit in a box, right? Yeah. And so, sure, maybe that worked on some level for some time, but what we're now seeing as a result is a really deeply dissatisfied, unhappy collective society, because we have been robbed of our individuality. And I was saying to, you know, this beautiful group on a call last night that manifesting generators and generators, which are two of the energy types in human design, make up 70% of the population. And their signature that they're here to live in is satisfaction. They're like this beautiful energetic pulse. And they're not self. So when they're not able or not giving themselves permission or not having the freedom to live by what actually feels good for them and living in that state of satisfaction, they're not self is frustration. And I said to the women on the call last night, I was like, when you look around right now, how much do you see? Like, what do you see more of? Satisfaction or frustration? And they were all like, frustration. And I was like, yeah. And so the other energy types, not self, is anger, bitterness, and disappointment. And I was like, we see way more of that than the signature of what we're all here to live in if we were being ourselves, which is satisfaction, peace, success, and surprise. And so for me, this ability to really be our individual selves and honor what's true for us, which I think is what this new era is coming into, which is actually calling us into dismantling our own inner structures and our own inner homogenization, all the ways that we've conformed to how things should be rather than honoring what we actually desire. And so what I'm noticing with that and what's possible with that is actually being that kind of switch point and like flipping the switch between the frustration as a benchmark, the anger, the disappointment, the bitterness being the norm, and just accepting that because, well, this is how things are. This is how things. And it's like when we actually allow ourselves to honor what is individually correct for ourselves, imagine the frequency flip on the planet. And that's why I'm so passionate about generators and manifesting generators doing what they love. Like, there's nothing that excites me more about really supporting them into that, because if 70% of the population was encouraged to do what felt satisfying to them, my God, the difference in the whole planet would be incredible. So that's really part of my why of what I do, is like really allowing people to see themselves, trust themselves, and believe in themselves to choose what's right for them, because we are like little light switches. And the more of us that are living in our signature, the more that it's just that popping all over the place, right? And so that then becomes infectious for the people that are around us to choose and be that permission slip to others to choose that too. And so I think that's really where individuality comes into it, is ultimately at its core. It's like, that's what we're here for. We're here to be ourselves, and we're here to choose things that feel correct for us, that allow more of those good feelings in.
Absolutely. I was at a networking event a week or two ago, and someone said something that really kind of just stuck for me, which was, are you being influenced or are you being inspired? And for me, I was like, whoa, that took things to a whole different perspective.
Yep.
But it really related to me then about your point with manifesting generators and generators, because, you know, are we being influenced to stay in a position of dissatisfaction, or are we being inspired to follow what we love, to create that new frequency and raise everybody up into a place of peace and success and satisfaction? So yeah, I mean, that really kind of threw things for me.
Yeah. And I find for myself, one of the biggest things that I've really come into awareness with my own design is that 70% of the population actually have what's called an open head center in human design. So this is our inspiration center. And so we actually need healthy sources of external inspiration to support our own inner process. But what I noticed for myself, and particularly in the early phase of my journey, I'd follow so many people in the same industry as me. And I think this is where I think so many people are kind of getting like bored with social media, because it's like, well, you come on and you're like, even if you look at like a trending reel, it's like everyone, if you scoot through, it's just like copied. And it's like the individuality piece is so missing in society. And so I think what I have loved about my own inspiration process is I'm no longer looking to people in my own industry for inspiration. Like, I look to artists, musicians, designers, like, you know, people at the top of their field in completely different fields. Like, when I had a subscription to Masterclass, like, I'd even watch Lewis Hamilton, like with the car racing and stuff, because I'm like, how cool. And I was like, that has nothing to do with human design, breathwork, or anything, but it's like, I loved being inspired by people like that, like filmmakers, like so many different things. That's where I seek my inspiration, because what it does is it inspires me, but it allows me to be like, oh, that's so cool. How does that apply to what I want to do? And so one of my favorite things that I created last year was actually not even a paid offering. It was actually just through my Instagram. I did this Instagram art exhibition on icons, innovators, and inspirations. And I got the idea for that watching Hip Hop Evolution on Netflix, watching all of these innovators in the hip hop community. And I was like, this is so fucking cool. Like, I was seeing like the person who invented scratching, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't even think of like someone inventing that. Like, so it's just like that invention and innovation was actually what inspired me to create that. And so I just treated my Instagram like an art gallery for a month, and I just spoke about purpose and creativity and expression and all of these things through that lens. I did breakdowns of like, you know, different innovators, human design charts, and kind of pointed out how they, you know, expressed through that lens. And that was so fun for me. But that wouldn't have happened if I was looking at what everyone else was doing in my space. And I think that's kind of what happens is everyone is just like, well, what can I do? What can I copy? What's everyone else doing? And it's like, no, what do you want to do? Because imagine if we logged onto Instagram and just saw like complete diversity of expression and thought. It would be so incredible. But I also think part of that is like over the last couple of years, I think the digital climate has gotten very heightened, let's say, like with like judgment and criticism. And so I think people are trying to play it safe and looking for all of the ways that they can conform to be approved of and play it safe in that way, so that people, you know, they're less likely to get criticized. And I also think sometimes when we're not really being ourselves, criticism comes easier because it's like, well, I just copied that reel anyway, so it doesn't matter. Or, well, I wasn't really being myself. Or people don't really know the real me. But when you're the real you and you're expressing everything of yourself online, that criticism will sting because it's you. And so I think a lot of the times we're also trying to avoid pain or discomfort or not being accepted through actually trying to morph ourselves into somebody else. And so I think that's kind of what this era is also really about, is like allowing ourselves to really be seen and witnessed like as our full expression of who we are. And yeah, sometimes that takes practice because we haven't done a lot of it in our life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to me. Like, I'm just like, I'm everything that you've said. I'm like, I relate to that. I relate to that. Yep. I literally hate scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, like Facebook, like whatever now, because I'm just like, oh, it's all the same shit. Like, it's the same thing, just a different person's posted it. Like,
yeah,
not that interesting.
I also think it's quite sad that what I've seen is a lot of people, and I've just noticed this like weird little trend. It's like people are doing silly reels or entertaining reels, but they don't actually post it to their main feed. They just have it in the reels tab, but it's like that's what's required to get visibility or reach. And then it's like their real work is on the front page, but they've got all of these like trending reels hidden away in their reel department because that's the only way they can be seen. And I'm like, so the only way we can be seen and visible is if we conform to the trends to try and bring people back to our individuality. And I honestly think that the algorithms have so much to answer for in this as well. And I just think that, yeah, I think that it really does come from the top down, but also those companies rely on our business. So it's up to us to show them what we actually want.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I remember not long ago, someone had shared like all these little cheat sheets about, you know, algorithm changes for Instagram. And like, you know, if you want to be seen, you need to be editing your reels through Instagram and not TikTok. And you need to do this, and you need to do that. And it was so structured. And it was, you need to be, you know, using these sounds and this, that. And I was like, wow, okay. So if everyone is doing the exact same thing, trying to be seen or trying to, you know, gain more visibility for their business or their, you know, content, whatever, it's all just going to look exactly the same.
Right.
There's not going to be any sort of individuality or expression there. It's just sheep. Like, we're just watching the herd of sheep just scroll on by. And I really, you know, I might sound a little bit bitchy about this, but it bores me. It really bores me, and it makes me sad. And I feel like, you know, it's not as cool. Like, when you have someone who is like really out there, like when you think of artists, musicians who were incredibly well known and famous because they were fucking weird. Yeah. Like, look at David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, Lady Gaga, like, because they are so different.
Yeah. And I think that this is like the thing that we forget, right? Especially when we get so bogged down by being influenced, as you said, by social media, is that actually, if you think of all of your favorite people, like if you think of the people where you're like, wow, I just love that artist, I love that musician, I love that designer, I love that person on Instagram, you're not loving them because they follow the trends. Like there'll be something about them that you're like, this person is so them. Like I love them, like how they express themselves. And most of the, if we think of like the top rating successful artists, is because they were willing to do something different. Even like, Apple, like, Steve Jobs, like that was his whole thing, was like, think differently. It's like,
Yeah.
so it's like the innovators are the ones who have the long-term success. Riding the trends might last for a while, but like ultimately I think what this new era is also moving us towards is what will actually give you a long-lasting legacy and something that you can actually hold on to and build that reputation is authenticity and building genuine relationships and connections. And you actually can't do that if you're not being yourself. If people can't actually feel you, this is, like I said, like what has worked in the past won't work in the future. And I think what has worked in the past is you can just literally show up and do whatever. But I don't think that's necessarily working anymore. And I think that people are going to be really buying and investing from a real heart-centered place. And that's based on their ability to connect with your heart. And if they can't feel it through all of the illusion and the way that we present ourselves online, then eventually that success is going to taper off. And so I think that I actually saw this like amazing post the other day where it was talking about soon AI will be able to replicate everything but the human soul. And I was like, whoa, like that's so profound. Like, because literally apparently like if, the way that technology is going is that if AI had like even just a minute of your recorded voice, it would basically be able to like replicate your communication and all of these different things. And so that soul expression and that like real authentic seed of who you are is going to be the only currency and point of difference moving forward. And that's what's going to stand out, because soon everyone's going to be using like Chat GDP to write their posts and like stuff. And like that soul is going to be missing. People are going to be craving soul expression. So allow yourself to lean more into that and less into the reliance on conformity.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when it comes down to, I guess, human design and breathwork and some of the modalities, mindset and everything that you use, how do people, different types of people, I should specify, respond to creativity and individualism?
That's a great question. I love that. I think it really comes back into there's so many like intricate layers in the human design chart, but I think even just bringing it back to the energy types is that kind of first point of call, right? So I'll give you an example of me with my journey. So for such a long time, and I now know that all of the beautiful people in my immediate orbit in terms of the people I have for mentors, well, not anymore, but like previously in the early stage of my journeys, all my mentors, all of my friends in business were all generators or projectors. And so I was emulating their energetic strategy, what was working for them and what I was seeing them doing, like asking polls and questions and what do you want to learn from me and all of these different things. And I was like, why does this not work for me? Like, what is wrong with me that this is not working? And it wasn't until I learned that I was a manifester and actually how to use my energy and that my strategy was to inform, not ask, and not to respond. I was here to initiate. That completely changed the perspective of how I showed up and how I operated in my life, in my communication, in my business, like all areas. And so that also changed the results that I was receiving and how people could receive me. So for manifestors, it's really about that initiating and informing what they actually want to create, what their vision is, what they want to achieve, what they're expressing into the world. And for generators and manifesting generators, it really comes from that seed of that sacral response. So what that like, that expansive sacral feeling in their body that then allows them to kind of like lean in and create and express from that seed of their joy and their satisfaction. And so what we get as a result of that is almost this contact high from their enjoyment of the thing and their passion of the thing. And like an example of this is I have a generator client, and like when I see her like truly excited about what she's speaking about, because she does nutrition, like her actual body is moving with excitement in her videos. And I'm like, I don't even need what you're selling, but I want to buy it because I'm just so captivated by your enthusiasm with this. So that enthusiasm is part of their individual contribution. And for projectors, their ability to see and guide and observe things that the rest of us are not going to be able to see and make these optimizations and improvements and kind of show us and illuminate things that we might have missed is part of their contribution. And reflectors are only 1% of the population. And they have this incredible ability to really tune into the health of the environment and tell us whether things are fair, equitable, just, or right. And so that's part of their contribution. So we can already see in these like initial layers, without even going into any of the elements of the design, that we all have this like individual contribution of how we bring our strengths through how our energy is here to exchange with the world around us. And so even at that level, there's 5 different ways of operating. And then we go down into this like multitude of different ways of being. And so, you know, our incarnation cross is a really beautiful space to even look at like part of our individual contribution, because that's the energetics of our purpose. And so there's so many little layers of like, you know, we've got our profiles, which are our archetypes we're here to embody, to bring those energetic gifts and purpose to life through the lens of our energy type. We've got so many different little intricate parts in our design that are our strengths, parts that we're here to learn and grow wisdom in, that we're here to contribute. So the more you get into the finite details of your chart, the more you can see how much we all are individual. We don't even need to try. We just need to remember and allow. And so that allowance already just means that we're making this individual contribution and expressing ourselves in unique ways. And that's what I love about sharing this system with people, is because people are like, it's not something that you're like, and a lot of the times you've probably invested in things where you're like, okay, I have to think about this. I have to try this thing. And it's like, it feels unnatural. It's because it's not for you. And so with human design, what I find is it's not necessarily giving people something they didn't know or that they have to try and do. It's like, wow, that is actually me. And I'm just going to stop fighting that.
Yeah. So coming into, I guess, that realization of, because I have had human design coaches on before. We've talked about different elements of each design, but the part that kind of gets stuck for some people, myself included, is like, okay, we're now aware of this, but how do we integrate this? Like, how do I, like, okay, for example, I am a manifesting generator, and obviously, so I can come into a little bit of initiating, but a lot of the time I'm responding. And I make decisions from the sacral. But if I am not trusting my sacral, my gut instinct, I'm going to come across obviously different challenges with integrating that. So is this kind of where you use breathwork to come through and kind of release some of those limiting beliefs or those doubts that stand in the way of people trusting themselves along these paths?
Absolutely. And like even just using that example of like connecting to the sacral, right? Like one of the biggest things that I see with generators and manifesting generators is they have lost connection to their body wisdom. And so part of that is actually redeveloping trust and connection and safety in the experience in the body. And depending on people's life experience, that could be incredibly difficult, or it could be a really small tweak. And so that's where things like breathwork and embodiment come into practice. But even other things like dance or movement or physical activity, like different ways of connecting back into the body and feeling the sensations in the body, can bring more of a trust into that gut response. And it's like you are actually having those gut sensations, whether you're aware of them or not. So it's not even that we like, you know, sometimes, you know, there could be a little bit of numbness in the body, but there will still be like a faint little seed of it somewhere. And so it's like bringing awareness into that little seed and allowing it to expand, and then being like, oh, okay, I felt that time. Okay, great. All right. Let me remember what that felt like. And then next time it's like, oh, okay, I felt it a little bit more, and I felt it a little bit more. But it's like bringing that awareness back into the body. And I think this is where the framework and the language of human design helps allow us to override the mind, because without it, So for example, if you're a generator and a sacral authority, which means you have this gut yes, gut no as your decision-making center, right? And so you might have this sinking feeling of like, oh, no. And then you're like, but, the mind comes in, but it's a really great opportunity. It's going to pay you really well. And it's great exposure. And like maybe sleep on it, maybe write a list. And it's like, then all of a sudden you're out of the body again. And it's like you had that moment and then the mind overrode it. But when you've got the human design language, you're like, hold on a moment. Okay, what's my gut saying? And then I get, people to connect in back through sound rather than vocalizing, because we can do a bit of but when we like come back up into the mind. So it's like, okay, in that moment, it's like, do I want to do this? Yes or no? And it's like, you might have a sound or a sound. And so even that's a way of like reconnecting to the body. So there's so many little different layers that we can start to play with depending on where you're at. But it's like just allowing yourself, I think, in allowing the mind to have this framework of understanding so that we can, when we feel ourselves going up into the mind, it's like, oh, hold on a moment. What does my design say again? Okay, yeah, let me trust the body. What's my body saying in this moment? And I think the mind then sort of gets on board and it's like, oh yeah, well, the piece of paper said so. And that thing, that diagram, that was factual. So we've got this like little tangible thing to hang on to that we can believe in rather than just disregarding our natural nature. Because I know for me, that was such a huge thing. Like even as a manifestor with the surges and rests, I would override my rest period because I'd be like, well, you've got to be consistent. You've got to show up online every day and you've got to, and so I would like push past that rest period. But now that I have a framework of understanding, I'm like, oh no, that's actually really important to my creative process. And my mind is like, yes, it is, because the piece of paper said so. So it's like, we just sometimes need that tangible thing to actually do what's already true for us, but it gives the mind something concrete to believe in so that it allows us to do that.
Yeah, the permission slip.
Yeah. The mind needs the piece of paper as the permission slip, the fancy diagram.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, a lot of, for me, I keep coming back to breathwork because that's what I experienced with you, but I'm like, yes. But I had so many opportunities to look at breathwork and I just kept going, no, I know how to breathe. I'm fine. Like I used to sing, I know how to breathe through my diaphragm. It's all good.
Yeah.
And not really having any sort of understanding of what it actually was. But when you came through the Self-Love Lounge and that opportunity came up and there was like one ticket left and I was like,
yeah,
okay, all right, this is the gut. This is the gut saying, yes, you want to give this a go. And so I did it. And, in doing it, I was so glad that I did. And I got a really great understanding of what breathing actually is and what breath work actually is. Because we think that we breathe subconsciously. It just naturally happens. Why is this so groundbreaking?
Yes.
And until you kind of have an experience, you can't really put it into that ideal or understanding. Yeah. But even with me, like I didn't expect to happen what happened. And with me, I got visions and I got experiences and I got sensations. And it was all based around the concept of what home was for me. Because I had really a unstable relationship with home. And so this was coming through for me, and this has completely changed my perspective on what home is. Because I used to think that, home was four walls and, a roof. Yeah. Whereas now I'm like, okay, no, home is my body for my soul. Home is people that support me and love me and make me feel safe. It can be a building. It cannot be a building. It can be many different things. And this opened up a new perspective for me, new feelings for me, and got rid of certain restrictions that were keeping me set. I mean, even for myself and my business, because I'm a mother, I often think, oh, I can't do that because I have to do this for my children. But my husband is more than capable of doing those things and is willing to and is being supportive. So it's moving away from that guilt, I guess, then of being a business person and a mother and rolling it all into one. But it just, yeah, it was changing this whole perspective and giving me that permission slip that I was like, oh, wow, okay, this really does change things.
Yeah. And I think that like that idea of like home being your physical body is also another really big piece that's landed for me in the last few weeks in like a different way of like, wow, okay, like this is really like, you know, my business, my livelihood, my legacy depends on how well I take care of this home.
Yeah.
It's like that nourishment piece has been huge because for me, you know, both of my parents were entrepreneurs, but actually their business came at a deep cost to their physical body and their health. And that awareness has just landed in the last few weeks of like, for me, there was this undercurrent belief that success equals poor health. And even though I wouldn't necessarily say that like I'm like in poor health, like I'm definitely like I'm health conscious, but also I can see how I have bought into that idea a little bit in like the sense that, you know, I was telling you before we jumped on, I've gotten back into like morning workouts, which have really fallen off since I went full time in my business. And just all these like little ways that I can see that I have been prioritizing my health as second to my business, but actually it needs to come first because if I'm not well, I can't create. And so even though I still am very health conscious, you know, I go to pole, I eat well, I take my supplements, all the things, but I can see where it's slipped a little bit. And it's like I've bought into that story a little bit on some level. And so this idea of like really that my physical body and my well-being is like the top priority has like definitely like come in a new way in the last couple of weeks for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think it's really interesting how different things like that pop up in different ways for different people. But they generally come down to the same message for us as a collective. Like it's, you need to be taking better care of yourself. You need to be, you know, opening yourself up to more and, you know, not having these restrictions and putting yourself first. And just how I guess that plays collectively always just like blows my mind that little bit where I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe there's more to this.
Yeah. And I think also like, you know, one of the things that I think I've realized is so many of the things that I've actually really landed in the last few weeks, like I've known mentally, but it's like the difference between what I have known up here has like actually integrated into the body in the last couple of months. And I'm like, whoa, this is like body wisdom, not mental knowing. And like that is like a really big shift. But again, that has also come from all of the body work and the embodiment work and the nervous system work that I've been doing over the past few months to like allow that to actually be received and actually integrated into my physical body, which informs the mind of what we're going to do. And so that shift has been, really profound. And it's reminded me all over again the power of that breath work and that embodiment work for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, thank you so much for sharing everything that you have today. I love the topics we've covered. I mean, I know we've kind of steered all over the shop with breathwork and human design, but individuality, I think, tied it all in.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for giving a manifestor a mic and giving me free reign to talk about whatever.
Yes, of course. I would love to have you back anytime. But if people are wanting to work with you specifically about, you know, human design, breathwork, coaching, they're wanting to learn more about you and get a bit more of a feel, where can they find you?
So the easiest place would be to go to my website, which is just kirstenmorrison.co. And there is a work with me tab, which has a little start here button. So you can have a look at all the different ways that you can work with me. And then also if you head to my Instagram, which is just at kirstenmorrison.co as well. And that's pretty much the only place I share online. I've kind of dropped off Facebook. I like probably share a TikTok like once every quarter. I don't even I keep forgetting that I'm on there. So definitely Instagram is the best way to connect.
Love it. Keeping it simple.
Yes. Well, I actually last year my Instagram went missing for 3 days and I was like, that's it. I'm diversifying. I'm going back to all the other platforms. And then within like 2 weeks, I was like, oh, damn, they've got me. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Yeah. Well, thanks so much again, babe. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, lovely.
Well, this is your Earth Side Spirit Guide signing off for the week. If you'd like to know more about how you can work with me, you can follow me on Instagram at l.embers or visit my website lembers.com.